Welcome to the Diverse Minds podcast, where we give you the tips, tools and techniques you need to be a mentally healthy and inclusive leader. Each week, you'll hear about a variety of topics linked to mental health, wellbeing and diversity that will enhance both your professional practice and personal wellbeing. Welcome to the 32nd episode of the Diverse Minds podcast. And on today's episode, I'm going to be talking about how lone and remote working can impact positively and negatively on our mental health. And I've decided to talk about this today as I don't think we can escape the fact that many of us are working from home, whether that's through choice or as a result of the physical distancing, social isolation measures. Lone and remote working, though, has become more popular in the last 10 years due to never-ending financial pressures placed on organisations. Current figures for people lone or remote working in Western Europe is thought to be 126.5 million. And some of us may prefer lone working as a choice, but for others the job will dictate. But interestingly, some businesses have been forced to stop operations altogether, with others seeing a wide-scale shift to home working almost overnight, and they might not be very well prepared for it. It was predicted by the Office of National Statistics that by 2020 half of the UK's workforce will work from home. Well, at the moment we certainly have hit that target, I would imagine. So how are you finding working from home if that applies to you, or effectively remote or lone working? Maybe you've really enjoyed it and nothing's changed for you. Or perhaps it's been overwhelming as you've had to juggle childcare and homeschooling alongside deadlines and work tasks. It could be that you've also realised no one is adequately set up for remote working, resulting in frustration. And over the last few weeks, I've spoken to numerous people who've been struggling, feeling like they haven't been given the gift of time or space, and in fact, it's been busier than ever, and their usual support strategies don't seem to work with this physical distancing and social isolation measures. And I think it's important to assess where you are with this, as we may be working in this way for quite some time. It's good to be aware of our trigger points and what we need to look at and what we need to do to look after our mental health. Research from 2010 from the British Occupational Health Research Foundation found that 64% of lone workers faced psychological distress, and this was significantly higher than workers who worked alongside colleagues in a secure environment. And then in a more recent report from the World Economic Forum in 2019, pointed to the fact that 41% of remote workers reported high stress levels compared to just 25% of office workers. And the World Economic Forum believed that out of sight, out of mind, and the tendency for managers to become increasingly task-focused and actually attempt to micromanage more was partly to blame. And both these things result in distress, and distress has a knock-on effect on both physical and mental health. And of course, if these negative feelings persist, depression and anxiety are likely to set in and affect performance, self-esteem and confidence. Spotting the signs, of course, can be tricky as a manager or colleague if there's reduced contact with certain members of staff. And many people at the moment feel lucky to have a job, so they may not want to disclose how they're feeling for fear of any reprisals or for losing their job. So keep listening, because at the end of the session, I'd like to encourage you to book a 1-hour power video call with me in relation to your mental health and well-being. I can help you focus on priorities to manage your work-life balance in the way that works for you, learn to plug any time leaks, because you might feel like you're running to stand still, even though the fact is we may not be in a physical workplace, as usual. Think about ways to stay connected during this period of social isolation, how to communicate with your wider team more effectively whilst working at a distance, and also reflect on your own well-being and what could work for you right now. And you can book a time that works for you using my Calendly and the links in the show notes. But there are practical steps you can take as a workplace and as a manager during this time to ensure that people stay connected, but also to look after your own well-being. Firstly, there are 3 key pieces of legislation that you might be aware of. The first one is the Health and Safety at Work Act from 1974. The second is the Management of Health and Safety at Work Regulations 1999, and the third is the Corporate Manslaughter and Corporate Homicide Act from 2007. One thing to do is to make sure everyone is aware of the practical steps of the law, how this impacts their role and current lone or remote working, and how that can work effectively. Unison has also provided a guide, Working Alone. This provides information for individuals, and the Health and Safety Executive has created lone working information for managers, the resources of which are in the show notes. And I always say, people are the goldmine of any organisation. Draw on staff talent by supporting everyone to flourish in the workplace, and you can't go wrong. So thinking about 5 ways to do this as a manager or from an organisational perspective, I think the first thing is to get the policies right. Now, it might be that the policies were fit for purpose, and at the moment with the pandemic, they might not be. But this is an opportunity to look at those policies and adapt them and see what could work and be done better. So ensure that policies draw on best practice, are easy to read and easily accessible for all. I've seen things that just get shoved on an intranet and no one can find them. And also make them as practical as possible. Perhaps have a quick straw poll or ask how people are working and what's been most effective, and get some case studies from managers displaying best practice. Now, I always say provide training on such policies. It's going to be difficult to do that. But is there a quick webinar, a way that you can connect people so they understand the rights and responsibilities from the organisational side, but also as individuals? Then the second thing I would say is to use risk assessments. Again, it's tricky to carry out risk assessments because we can't go to people's homes, and that wouldn't be appropriate anyway. But are there toolkits and checklists that people can use for themselves in their home environments for staff will be remote or lone working? Identify what the main issues might be and how to mitigate them. If you need some help, the Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, IOSH, has a checklist that you can download and adapt or use for starters. The third thing is to be proactive and think about what's going on at the moment for the individual. What are the key priority tasks for yourself and for your team, and what needs to be focused on? You might have to put systems in place as you go, but that's okay, at least you're responding. You don't need to wait for a negative incident or problem to occur. The fourth is using technology, and as most of you will know, I'm sure you're using Zoom and Google Hangouts and other corporate platforms you might have, and actually the internet lines are a bit log jammed. However, this is the time to use technology more than ever. Think about video conferencing, what works, how people could be part of team meetings, make sure there's a dial-in function. And then the fifth thing is signposting. Make sure all workers, particularly now, know how to access support, whether that's through team members, through yourself as a line manager, HR, employee assistance programs and or trade unions, and check how they're communicating with people at the moment. And again, going back to IOSH, they funded some research into lone working that was carried out by the University of East Anglia and Kingston University. It was published in 2017 and it's entitled Out of Sight, Out of Mind. And there's a downloadable toolkit and resources available as part of the report. Now, the second bit, thinking about lone working and yourself, is what kind of habits do you want to set up to benefit your mental health and well-being? And I would say, think about your routine. You might have to adapt your routine a bit, especially if you're doing homeschooling or you've got childcare responsibilities. But integrate your children or your younger dependents into this. So what does your routine look like? Maybe you don't have to wake up at 6 o'clock anymore. That's great. So waking up at 7:30, how you're going to have breakfast together, how you set your tasks. Think about your workstation and any younger dependents you may have. Now, it could be difficult because not everyone has lots of space in their home, but basic things like your equipment, a supportive chair, consider could you stand up and work if that's right for you, and get up regularly to stretch. I would say at least once an hour. If you can, find a space away from the main home area. And definitely, it's not always possible for everyone, but bedrooms, to try and separate work and life. Your bedroom might not be the best place to have your desk, but I appreciate that not everyone has the luxury of choice. So if you don't, is there a way you can create a corner where you're working, put some pot plants, maybe next to the window, and create some space there? And I would say try and minimize distractions. And this is incredibly difficult because I know many people have lots of messages coming in from their schools, WhatsApps from teachers, etc. But are there times where you could maybe put a do not disturb on your phone, close off some of the apps that distract you, and try and get things done when you're fresh early in the morning? And of course, try and get some fresh air. At the moment, we are still allowed out for one short break to get some fresh air and exercise. And this is something you can integrate with any younger dependents as well, to go out and get some fresh air. And also think about the food that you're eating. I'm not here to lecture anyone about food, but what kinds of things are going to fuel you and make you feel well and help your brain to keep working? You'll know what they are for you. So I'm not saying we're going to be able to get this right, this overnight sense that many, many people are home working, lone working, remote working. But by being aware and mindful that this is a time of transition, it's going to be easier to respond to things and adapt accordingly. So don't forget, you can still connect, but talk about what's best for yourself and the person or people that you manage. How do you want to stay connected? Think about your positive daily habits that will support you to differentiate your personal life from your work life, as it's all happening in the same space. Don't forget to use risk assessments and check that you and the people that you manage are mindful of the risks and talk about ways to mitigate them. How can you still maintain that team vibe? Coffee mornings, WhatsApp, company Slack channels, whatever works for you, but to build that team camaraderie so you can support each other going forward. And finally, signpost to those existing resources that are available from a corporate perspective to help everyone. And they don't just have to be from the corporate perspective. You could also signpost to reputable charities like Mind, the Samaritans, Anxiety UK, etc. And you also might have some your own charities that your company works with. So I hope you found this really helpful, and I've listed some resources in the show notes. But if you want to talk about this more, please book a free 30-minute call with me, and I can help you discuss ways in which you could support your team or yourself with remote, lone, or home working. As I've mentioned, also feel free to book a 60-minute power hour session with me to help you support your wellbeing. The cost of the power hour is £120, and I can help you focus on your priorities to manage your work-life balance in a way that you want to. I can help you learn to plug your time leaks, to help you think about ways to stay connected during this period of social isolation, how to communicate with your wider team more effectively whilst working at a distance, and also reflect on your own well-being and what could work for you right now. And you can do this directly on my Calendly link. And why not access my ebook, The Mentally Healthy Leading Manager? It's a completely free resource with tools, tips, and a checklist that can help you work more effectively as a manager or as part of a team working remotely. And don't forget, there are small things you can do to make this period better for yourself. By looking after your mental health and being a role model, you'll absolutely help that of your teams. So I wish you all the best in your endeavours with supporting your team and yourself with an extended period of home, lone, or remote working. And remember, I am here, so do reach out because I'd be happy to help. And I'll see you in the next episode, where we'll be talking more about mental health and inclusion. Thanks for listening to the Diverse Minds podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you access your podcasts from. You can also connect with me on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Tune into next week's episode of the podcast, where I'll bring you more insights on mental health and inclusion. Bye for now.